So over the past year and a half, um, there has been a lot of focus on the situation in Hong Kong, and rightly so. But there is actually now developing another democracy movement in the Far East, and I'm not suggesting this is entirely new. Um, it's involving Thailand, which is a country that has long had political instability, and where political factions have long vied for control. Throughout the 2010s, there was clashes between so-called red shirts and yellow shirts. If you know anything about Thai politics, you'll know that the monarchy is absolutely central to everything in Thailand. Um, Thailand is, on paper, a constitutional monarchy, which makes it on par with Britain and Spain and other constitutional monarchies. But the reality is, it's more like an absolute monarchy because the power that the royal family has there, particularly under the last king, was immense, absolutely immense. Whereas in countries like the United Kingdom and Spain and the European monarchies, um, and even in Japan, the monarchy's significance, I would argue, has become far more constitutional. In Thailand, it's more comparable, I would suggest, to the absolute monarchs of the Middle East and North Africa in the case of Morocco. And this is because it's defended by some very draconian laws. Now, I've just been reading this article from the London Times from a few days ago from Richard Lloyd Parry in Bangkok. Richard Lloyd Parry is a very experienced journalist. I've got a book by him uh, which featured the Indonesia protests of 1998. Anyway, very experienced journalist in the region. I won't read out the whole article, but I'll read a bit of it, give you an idea of what's going on there if you don't already know. Tens of thousands of people gathered in front of the Grand Palace in Bangkok to install a symbolic plaque rejecting the monarch's authority, continuing 2 days of protests against Thailand's conservative political establishment. I should say this is from the 21st of September. That plaque has been removed now. In peaceful scenes that would have been unthinkable a few months ago, 20 to 30,000 protesters defied a police ban to fill Sanam Luang or Royal Field. They listened to speeches demanding the resignation of the government of the Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, apologies if I am, who staged a coup in 2014 and was returned to office in a disputed election last year. Many of his critics, I should say, consider Prayut a dictator. The demonstrators also called for the abandonment of the constitution, which many believe enabled him to be elected unfairly. Most remarkable of all were the outspoken statements about the monarchy after a group of students from Thammasat University presented a list of 10 demands last month. I believe it was also students from that university that were involved in violent crackdown in 1976. Um, it's quite a prestigious university, as I understand, in Thailand. These demands include removing the king's legal immunity. If you know anything about Thailand, this is incredible. Opening royal finances to scrutiny and investigating the disappearance and deaths of critics of the monarchy. They also demanded the abolition of Thailand's Majeste law, under which critics of the royal family can be jailed for 15 years, as well as pardoned for those convicted under it. Unless a monarchy is under the constitution, we will never achieve true democracy, Arnon Nampa, a human rights lawyer, said. Now, there have, of course, been counter demonstrations from royalists, which is to be expected. Thailand still has a very strong royalist contingent, and they are very vocal and not above using violence to defend the monarchy, and not above using threats of intimidation. I know this for a fact because I know of people who have been had to get refugee status, or rather asylum status, I should say, due to the very real threats that they face in Thailand for criticizing the monarchy. My take is this. This is something I'm personally interested in because it's a situation I've been following for years. I've made previous videos on the Les Majeste laws, um, and I think they're an abomination. I mean, to go to jail for up to 15 years simply for having an opinion that the monarchy needs to change. This is a law that can actually be used to persecute people. because all it takes is two neighbours falling out with each other. One can accuse the other of violating their Majeste. So the very perception of violating it is in itself dangerous. Um, Even questioning the law itself, not criticizing the monarchy directly, but the law itself can get you into very hot water. And there have been several high profile cases of foreigners who have got on the wrong side of this. The Australian writer Harry Nicolaides, who I understand has Thai background as well, um, was imprisoned under this law. He eventually got a royal pardon. Usually, that's what happens with um, foreign critics of the law or foreign nationals who are accused of abusing the law. They usually get a royal pardon after a relatively short time. And I think that may be the Thai authorities' way of kind of deflecting criticism from it. Look how gracious the monarchy is. But for Thai critics, it's even worse. They can get many years behind bars, and in some cases, they get their lives threatened. There was one situation where a woman, shortly after King Bhumibol died in 2016, uh, a mob forced her to grovel to a royal portrait because she'd been accused of lèse-majesté. So this woman had to literally grovel on the ground. If you look at Thai prime ministers, they literally prostrate themselves in front of their king. Now, why are things changing right now? I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think Prayuth is a genuinely controversial figure. It's incredible courage from these young people. I'm behind them 100%. These are peaceful protests, and what they are demanding is basic human rights, the right to freedom of dissent. They're not even calling for the monarchy to be abolished. They're simply calling for freedom of expression. And just watch, the response of Thai royalists. I'll probably even get slack for making this video. I don't care. If you're a Thai royalist, I have nothing against the king. However, Thailand has no right to call itself a democracy if you're locking up people simply for having an opinion. Um, Although Thailand has many newspapers and people can robustly debate other issues, the monarchy remains incredibly sensitive. That's wrong. Um, I mean, these laws belong in another century. Just to put this in context, lèse majesté is a French term. It was used in royal era France, the absolute power of kings. We had it as well, but the last time it was prosecuted in the United Kingdom, unless I'm mistaken, was about 1715. In other words, we haven't prosecuted it for 300 years. In Britain, cartoonists regularly mock the royal family, and whilst generally the Queen isn't directly criticised, if a cartoonist was to mock the Queen, he or she would not get into trouble. Some royalists might be a little bit, irritated by it, but the point is there's no laws against it. That's the way it should be. Because in the end of the day, kings and queens and princes and princesses are human beings. They shouldn't be above scrutiny. Now, it may be that these young people have been more galvanized because the current king is nowhere near as popular as his father. Although the institution is still protected, um, he's a bit of a controversial character because he spent a long time in Germany and he was a bit of a playboy, whereas his father spent a long time in Thailand. So I don't think he's as popular as his father. Um, this is King Rama the 10th, to take his regal name, um, or Vajra Longhorn, um, in his given name. But I'll be watching this situation carefully. I think it is very remarkable. I mean, there's no way they can just lock up 30,000 people. I have huge, huge respect for these young people who are speaking out for their freedoms, basically. And of course, they're going on the path of brave people in the past who dissented and who paid a price for it. I think if Thailand is truly to be a democracy, it needs to get rid of Les Majest laws, which are known in the Thai Penal Code as Article 112 laws. They need to get rid of that because if they don't, then Thailand is not a democracy. You cannot have a democracy where people are jailed for voicing dissent. You just can't. And if this is offensive to some people, well, the truth can be offensive. I'm not violating the laws because I'm not making this video in Thailand. So I just want to say if you are among the protesters, you have my support 100%. And if you're a royalist, I'm an outsider. It's not for me to say whether there should be a monarchy or not in Thailand. I appreciate that the royal family, like the UK, is deeply ingrained in Thai culture. I totally appreciate that. But uh, put it this way, the monarchy itself has often, the last king said that he was not above criticism. That was his own words. So it's nonsensical to say you're protecting the monarchy simply by locking up critics. Um, if there's genuine support for the monarchy in Thailand, why are these absurd laws needed? Why are these brutal laws needed? I believe these are brutal laws, and Thailand needs to get rid of them. There's no chance of that happening under the current dictatorship, but I think that it's something that hopefully over time will gradually be part of history. But these things are never easy, and I just have enormous respect for the courage of these young people.